Hi everyone. No, I would just like to clarify I am not announcing a grand return to the Podfics. I am, however, here to talk lost projects, I suppose. These were long forms that were in the works or were at least being plotted, and I either gave up on for plot reasons or because of the allegations. I'm gonna start off with projects that I had previously announced. I'm gonna start with WandaVision. WandaVision was. I just thought it was perfect. It was to center around Aziraphale and Crowley in, as you know if you've seen WandaVision, a 50s to 80s and 90s style sitcom in which they would be a happy couple having to conceal their demonic and angelic abilities from their neighborhood. I just thought it was perfect. So I plotted it straight away. I announced it as soon as I made my then return. But I'd had it in the works for months, so by the time I announced it, I thought, okay, this is I'd already written episode 1, so I thought, okay, this is definitely gonna go ahead. And then it didn't. The thing about WandaVision was that at the end, it was actually Crowley who was going to die, despite Aziraphale being sort of a means of. I mean, he wasn't really there. I hadn't yet figured out why he wasn't there, but he wasn't real. That wasn't the real Aziraphale that he was talking to. And I thought it was poetic to have Crowley killed off instead in the end, and to have the real Aziraphale end the series by going to find him on like a cliffhanger that was never going to get resolved. The reason I'm saying all this now is because it's never going to happen. But yeah, that is how WandaVision was going to like start and end. It would turn out that Crowley and his grief created a sort of mega miracle that made a version of Aziraphale show up, and this miracle was so powerful that it affected everybody else. He didn't know that it had, but I was gonna also, in my opinion, fix what was wrong with WandaVision. The one thing that was, I was going to have Crowley absolutely snap and not be redeemed. Like, I think one of the problems I have with WandaVision as a show is that it had Wanda do all these terrible things, had her go over the edge and threaten people, and then paint her out to be the hero. And I just thought that was really weird. So I just decided not to do that this time. I decided to make Crowley the villain. And he was going to get worse and worse until inevitably he was forced to give up his reality. Forced by God, actually, who was going to play the role of Agatha, pretty much. She was going to be called in her human form Frances, after Frances McDormand, who voices God in Good Omens. And she was going to play the role of the supportive friend, the supportive neighbor, but she wasn't recognized because everyone else in the community was either a human that Aziraphale and Crowley knew, or an angel or a demon. And the reason that, they played the part of having to conceal their abilities is because Crowley thought that was what was best for the sitcom. They disguised themselves as humans among a world of angels and demons. Now, would that have worked? Probably not. I would have had to tweak that. But yeah, that was I mean, I wish I got to do it, to be honest. And I would one day maybe go back, but I can't write that whole first script again. And I can't plot all 9 episodes all over again. I can't do it, lads. The next project that I had in mind, at least, was La La Land. This was a weird one. I'm glad I didn't make it. This was going to follow Aziraphale and Crowley meeting on Earth after 6,000 years, so they've spent 6,000 years on Earth, but they've never crossed paths, and falling in love as they try to balance good and evil, the good and evil within themselves, I suppose. It was meant to be quite poetic, but then I kind of realized it didn't really have a plot. The only plot was their romance. And unlike La La Land, which actually had a plot, it was directionless. So that's why I never went with it in the end. I only got around to thinking of it in my head. I didn't even get a chance to plot it before I realized that it was absolutely directionless. In order for an idea to stick with me and for me to write it down, I need to know where it's going. So I couldn't go forward with this one. Then there was The Notebook, which I absolutely had plotted, and it was gonna have an ending, but I didn't really know what that ending was going to be, because an angel and a demon are not gonna die of an illness together. So I knew I wanted them to die together at the end. I just didn't know how that was gonna work. So basically, in that version of The Notebook, Aziraphale, upon returning to heaven, has actually had his memory wiped. Crowley discovers this off screen and goes to visit him and to try and get his memory back, regain his memory, and tells him the story of an angel and a demon who fell in love. And obviously, like, this angel and demon are him and him, but he doesn't know that, and then he figures it out. And you know how The Notebook goes. I got all that down. I got the flashbacks down. I got everything down. I just didn't know how to end it. And I lost the love. So that was the end of that. You can tell that by the end I was really beginning to struggle with keeping a hold of ideas. That's when the next one comes in. I was going to do a 2003 adaptation of Peter Pan, which I mentioned in a previous video. The 2003 version of Peter Pan was too complicated for me to put into Good Omens' world, really. I thought that no story could ever be too complicated, but apparently, like, there's just bits and pieces of it. Like, the idea of Peter Pan works for Crowley, I think, but the whole plot of the film is just too complicated. Like, who the hell is Captain Hook? Who the hell is Tinkerbell? Who the hell are the Lost Boys? There's so much that complicates things. And really all I wanted it to be was this sweep off your feet romance in which by the end they had to separate. Okay, I'm a sucker for sad endings, sue me. I just didn't know I knew my beginning and I knew my end, I just didn't know my middle, and I could never get to that point. I plotted the entire thing and started writing the script, and it all fell apart. Then, okay, so this was a really interesting one that I really wish could have happened, but I even knew when I was writing it that there was no way I would have managed this. I was gonna do Arcane. I was going to basically take the massive award-winning world of Arcane and put it into Good Omens, which would have gone something like this. Aziraphale and the angel Raphael, then obviously it's Crowley, but we call him Raphael for the story, as we did in the Frozen AU, are angels that are suffering with fear because they have learned that Lucifer has fallen. While Aziraphale is petrified, Lucifer was Raphael's best friend, so he just wants revenge for him, which eventually leads to him falling. 6,000 years later, he goes by Crowley and is a killer demon. Like, he's the most feared demon in all of hell. Heaven despise him. And upon all of this going on, Aziraphale is actually Archangel, because I forgot to mention that in the events of Crowley's fall, Gabriel was killed and things like that. So, teaming up with an angel called Evangeline, a character that I invented for this, which I don't think I did before, they would team up and they would go and find Crowley. But the whole story of it was that Raphael was gone, and that, like, it follows the story very closely to Arcane. And by the end of the story, Crowley was going to die. I don't care what the show says about Jinx's death. Crowley was going to die, okay? It wasn't going to be left open to interpretation. And the last scene was going to be a flashback of him finally having the strength to fly with his demonic wings, which was going to be an ongoing plot thread that he hadn't the strength to do it. And we find out that at the end, before he died, he found the strength to do it. And it was going to be a really poetic ending that never happened. And never will happen. The reason I didn't go through with Arcane was because it was too complicated. I got imposter syndrome and thought that there was no way I would be able to live up to how good Arcane was, and I know that wasn't the point. But there were too many characters, too many plots. I forgot who was who at times, and as much as I love Arcane, damn, that cast is big. And there's Peter Pan Return to Neverland. That was my last one. So that was going to follow Aziraphale, discovering that Armageddon was happening, being unable to stop it and running away, meeting the Demon Crowley on Earth. The Demon Crowley is a legend woven throughout heaven. Nobody actually thinks that he exists. And then they meet and they fall in love and voila, you know the story. I understand that in Peter Pan nobody actually falls in love, but I do think it's a bit poetic to take bits and pieces of that story and make it romantic. Just me. And yeah, those are my lost stories. Those are the stories that never got made. I do wish I could have done at least some of them. I do think a lot of them had very interesting concepts, but I guess we'll never know. I hope you all are doing well. Stay safe.